make as short as possible, our veterans have earned our highest priority. And yet we know that there is also routine health care needs that veterans have that, in my view, they should not have to go to the VA to receive, okay? We have, tragically and unfortunately in this war, a dramatic, well, we're going to have a lot of PTSD. We also have severe combat injuries because, thank God, we're able to get the wounded from the battlefield to medical treatment more quickly than any time in history. But that puts an increased burden on our military medical care as well as our VA. So, you mentioned Albuquerque VA, I believe. I could take you to the Albuquerque VA or the Phoenix VA quite often, and the waiting room is crowded. The veterans are standing in line to stand in line to get an appointment, That's not the fault of the people that work there. The people that work there are some of the finest in the world. It's just that they are overloaded. So we have to focus our attention, expand our capability to treat PTSD, combat-related injuries, brain injuries, etc. that we're best at. And for a veteran with a routine health care need, why shouldn't we give that veteran a card and take it to the health care provider or the doctor of their choice and get the routine health care that they need? That's what... That way, we could utilize the VA and the military medical system to its greatest effect and also relieve this burden. I don't ever again want to have a veteran to stand in line to get an appointment, That's just not acceptable in America. And again, I do praise the people who work there. They're some of the most dedicated people I've ever known in my life. The problem is there's just not enough of them. Yes, ma'am.
Senator McCain, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming to Las Cruces. And Senator Obama tends to be the favorite among college students, and as a college student, I feel that you do care about us because we are the future of America. So I'd like to give you a brief respite from political questions and controversy and ask you what the single best piece of advice you can give college students with political aspirations.
Well, first of all, obviously, get involved. The future of this country rests with you. I would not be running for President of the United States if it was not that I believe the next generation of Americans deserve a better, freer, more prosperous nation than the one that I inherited. I think that now you have enormously increased ways of communicating over the internet. Whether you happen to like blogs or not like blogs, the fact is that they have changed politics in America in many ways. The dialogue and the discussion and the broadening of it has been enormous. I also think that you ought to be associated either with a campaign or a cause that you believe in. I think there's nothing more illuminating, there's nothing more educational, and there's nothing more beneficial than to support something that you believe in a political campaign and watch this flawed and problem-filled process of ours go forward and the American people reach decisions and conclusions and pick their leaders and decide on our future. And I hope that the message to all young Americans, as well as all, but particularly the next generation, is that it does matter. It does matter what decisions are made now, because the decisions made now are going to directly impact your future and your children and your grandchildren. I'm happy, frankly, with the new means of communication that we have, the internet, and a lot of other ways, and the proliferation of television channels, and a lot of other things that we now have greater sources of information and knowledge. Some of them I strenuously disagree with, but the fact is that all I can say that I believe as President of the United States, my first job is to inspire a generation of Americans to serve a cause greater than their self-interest. And I believe that that is true of America today, probably more than at any time in the past. You look at the men and women in the military, you look at Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Teach for America, you look at all of these volunteer activities that young Americans have engaged in, that it's my job to provide them with the ability to participate. And thank you for being here. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming out. In the past, you've alienated a great deal of conservatives who believe that conservative principles are obviously answered by stepping across the aisle. And the third point of a vice president is the opportunity to groom himself to be president in the next cycle. Are you going to pick a conservative...
Or the cycle after that, yes.
Are you going to pick a vice president that conservatives can actually rally around in the future? Or are you going to give us someone who will cause us to want to stay home, perhaps? Thank you.
Well, sir, may I say, at least according to the polling data we have, we're doing very well with our base. We have a lot more work to do to energize our base. We also have to energize our base who cares a lot about our lack of fiscal responsibility, who are very angry. We're also going to have to energize our base that cares about this nation's security, which is probably, and when we look at the many challenges we face, are probably very significant. I will choose I will nominate a person to be vice president, my running mate, who shares my principles, my values, and my priorities. And that's